I got a message asking if I have any tips on how to get a better guitar sound once it's been recorded. Now, this person is using a Line 6 interface and kind of cheapy monitors. So they're using guitar plugins, amp simulators to get their guitar sound. Then they don't have a head and a cab and they're not miking up. They're going directly into their interface and recording their guitars. So first thing we need to do is make this clear that there are a lot of amp simulators out there that have a myriad of amp sims, from all the way from Marshall to Fender to Mesa to whatever manufacturer you can think of. There is probably a simulation of that amp. I'm going to try and keep this as simple as possible. So I've got this guitar part here. It's a very simple guitar part. So very simple chord progression just running through there. Now, the amp sim that I like to use for this sort of thing is, I've got one from Slate, the THU from Slate, or I like to use this Diezel amp. It is the VH4 from Diezel. Sounds really, if you like Tool, that's the amp that you want. This is the amp that the guitarist from Tool uses, okay? But Metallica, I think James Hetfield uses it and things like that from Metallica. So big metal amp, okay? I'm not going to use this for this demonstration because the actual knobs and stuff themselves aren't particularly great to look at, I suppose. Plus, the Slate one here has a lot more amps to choose from. This is why I like this. This is why I have this, because obviously I work with a lot of different clients and they have lots of different rigs, and I want to try to match up their rigs as much as possible. And they've got on there everything from Fenders to Marshalls to Mesas, to orange amps and things like that. So they've got lots on there for me to kind of dip into if I need to, and they have bass amps and things like that. So the very first thing you kind of need to get your head around is what sort of amp do you want to use? And this is probably going to be genre specific, I suppose. If you're into metal and things like that, that's what I work with. I obviously use a lot of Diezel, but I come across a lot of Randall stuff, come across a lot of Orange, a lot of Mesa and things like that. Work with that, sometimes with the more rockier acts that I work with. Like I was working with a punk rock band recently, we used a lot more Marshall and things like that. So probably the best way to do it, and ideally what you want to do is, what I would suggest you do is find a music shop that sells amps. Go to that shop, take your guitar and play a few of these amps, okay? Try to find a shop that has a variance of amps for you to play around with and kind of just fiddle around with. Firstly, it's quite a lot of fun to do. Secondly, it kind of gives you an idea of what you like, what sort of sound you want to go for and things like that. Before you get into all of this, especially if you're thinking along the lines of, oh, I'm going to write songs, I'm going to produce songs, and then I'm going to look to play live and things like that. You want to be able to recreate what you've produced when you're playing live as much as possible. So try to keep that in mind. If you can't go to a music shop, or none of the music shops stock the sorts of stuff that you really want to play, like finding a Diezel amp in a music shop is going to be really difficult to find here in the UK, because generally they're sold in the States. So it's quite difficult from that perspective. Probably the best way, if you don't have that as an option, is to just do some research. You have bands that you have obviously influenced your music. You know, what amps do they use? What guitars are they using? So, for example, if you're big into Guns N' Roses and you love Slash's guitar sound, and you want to emulate that in some way, you're going to want a Marshall amp and a Gibson guitar. That's what he's known for. They sponsor him. You know, they're going to give him all the stuff. So that's very much a Slash combination of Gibson guitar, Marshall amp. That's the first thing you need to do. What I personally use is a Mesa. I use a rectifier, so I'm going to show you on this what I do. So obviously the first thing I'm going to do is pull in the actual amplifier itself. It's a head, and it's just asked me, do I want to match it? Yes, because I have a Mesa head, a rectifier, and I have a 4x12 cabinet, this is an emulation of. But the thing that I do is I put a pedal, an Ibanez tube screamer in front of that. Now, so I'm going to do that as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill the drive on it, okay? Because I want this to set up as much or as closely to my setup as possible. Now, I do this when I'm writing and when I'm kind of demoing out songs, mainly because this is a much easier way for me to do this than it is to set the amp up, set mics up, and get recording and things like that. That happens when we get into production. So this is very much a writing, demoing kind of tool. Okay? So this is the guitar part, and then if I turn this on, so straight off the bat, it's a nice big sound, okay? If I a bit more tone in there like that. So what the tube screamer is doing, it's adding more tone to the overall sound, but it's also compressing that sound to my ear anyway. Because I'm not driving it in any way, it's purely there to shape the sound. It's not there to add any drive or any volume or anything like that. So without it, and then with it, it's quite a subtle thing. That's the tube screamer. Straight off the bat, got that set. One of the things, or the great things about this Stephen Slate stuff is what you can do if you go into the settings, you can tweak the amp itself. So you can set this to different types of tubes, okay? So this is kind of the standard tube that Mesa would come with. It's the 12AX7, and it's a standard one, okay? And then you've got these different types of preamps, okay? And then you can choose different types of power amps. So I like that one. That's cool. That works really well. Now, going on to the actual amp, the front of the amp itself, what I want to do is, firstly, this is a modern metal song, so I'm going to set it to the modern thing, but I like to make sure first, to make sure that raw. Yeah, modern gives it that extra bit of punch, I think, to my ear anyway, that I'm looking for from a modern metal song, okay? Now, moving on to the actual dials themselves, this section, okay, going from drive all the way to level. What I do is I set every one of these to midday, okay? So it's in the middle of absolutely nothing to absolutely everything, okay? And then we're going to work going from left to right, okay? So we're going to start here with drive, okay? Now, the thing with drive is, this is obviously the amount of gain that guitar sound's going to have. The thing to remember with gain is that the more gain you have, the less defined the notes are going to be, because you're adding that extra distortion. So the more distortion you have, the less clarity you're going to have in your sound, okay? So what I do is I start it playing off and I bring it all the way down. So you've still got that, it's just not got a lot of drive to it. And then I'll pull it up just until I hear that bite. It just bites into that guitar sound, okay? That's what you want. You just, when you hear that bite, just leave it there, okay? And same with the bass. Bring it down. Or you just sweep it until you find a nice sweet spot with it. And if you need to switch any of your pedals off, do that just to be sure. And then the same with your mid. Okay, presence. Okay, so, and you literally just sweep your way through it until you find a nice sound that you're looking for, okay? And that's going to vary. It depends on your ear and what sound you really want to go for. With the volume, what I do is I will rely on your meters. So your level coming in and out, okay? What you don't want that. That's no good, okay? So all of these amps, or a lot of these amps, sims will have some kind of metering to it. If not, you'll have metering in your actual DAW that will tell you whether or not you're kind of blowing stuff out or not. The next thing is, once you've kind of got that set, what we have is, on the Stephen Slate stuff, you might not have this on some of your amp sims, but on the Stephen Slate stuff, what you've got is the actual mic positions. You've got 2 mics per cab, okay? Now, if you go into the settings of that, you can set this. You can choose what you want. An American 57 is basically a Shure SM57, which is a standard thing, okay? But if you can move it around. So you can hear that. So, and treat this in the same way that I would mic up an amplifier. Okay, I'd get it playing, get the guitarist playing, and I would physically move the microphone around. Okay, so with this mic, I'm looking for it to be on the grill itself. So I'm looking for a really nice upfront sound. Okay, with the other amp, because generally what I would do is some kind of condenser mic, I would probably use something like this 414, okay, which is basically one of these, very similar to one of these. This is a AKG, this is a 314, but it's a stereo pair. But so this would be very similar. So knock that one out so I can just hear. And I'd have it slightly off axis, and bring the other one in. Bring it down overall, like that. Now, that sounds great. That sounds... That sounds awesome. Okay, it's got a nice big sound to it using those two. I've got this off axis. The other thing that you can do, which a lot of engineers do with open back guitar cabinets or guitar amps, is that they'd have a mic in the rear. So you'd have one at the front on the speaker and then one at the back on the speaker. As long as it's an open back, you can't really do this with a closed back unless you can get that panel off. Sometimes I do that. I'll take the panel off, and what you do is you put one normally an SM57 on the front, and then another SM57 in the back, and they're perfectly aligned. And then what you do is you change the polarity of the one on the back so that they work together in tandem. You get a nice sound from that. This part that says rear emulates that. Okay, so if I bring that up, level that off a bit, and that's nice. Yeah, cool. And that makes a nice, great sound. And then if I wanted to go more in depth into that, what I can do is use things like an equalizer, something like that. If I wanted to maybe put a high pass filter on there or something like that. To just kind of pull that out, maybe add a bit more presence. So it'll probably be around. So that's cleaned that up a lot. So you could probably take a bit of the presence out there. That might be actually a little bit much. Okay, and then, yeah, so that's cleaned up that high end a bit more, and it's balanced out that low end with that, just that little parametric EQ on there. So that is essentially how I do it. I approach it very much like how I set up guitars, like physical guitar amps. I do this exactly the same way, okay? I set everything to midday, and then I sweep each band through, and I'm looking for that, or I'm listening for that sweet spot. And once I've found that, we're good to go. And then it's just a matter of, well, how does that guitar sound fit with the rest of the elements within the song, like the drums and everything else. So that's that. The other thing, if you want a much bigger sound working beyond that, is whether or not you want to do double tracking or quad tracking guitars. Now, generally what you're going to be doing is double tracking. Okay, so double tracking, if you don't know what that means, is you record one take of your guitar part, and then you re-record the same guitar part again, and then what you do is you pan it as wide as possible. So what I've got here is this very thing right here. Okay, so if I take that rig and I pop it here, and I go like so. So this is basically a mono guitar part, straight up the middle, sounds like this. Okay, sounds great. Okay, it's fine. But what if we take that and we put that to this? So it's on the left-hand side. It should be on your left-hand side if you're listening to this. Okay. And then we take this other guitar part here, and we pop that to the right with exactly the same amp, exactly the same setting. So the only difference is the performance here, okay? We go like that, and straight off the bat, it's a much bigger sound, a much bigger spread, okay? So, and obviously then the other thing you can do is quad tracking, which obviously puts another 2 guitars into that. You can build off that. That tends to get a bit too much, okay? I would get the double tracking right before you start getting into quad tracking. But I have a YouTube video about quad tracking if you would like to look at that one. But that is essentially it at the end of the day. Like I say, this is exactly how I set these things up. If you like this video, please do subscribe, hit the notification bell, and all that sort of stuff. You know what to do, okay? I don't really need to tell you. If you don't know what to do by now, I don't know. I can't help you at the end of the day. But yeah, that's essentially it. Thank you very much for watching this. I hope this has helped you, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.